To all of you, shall we start? So, today we will start with another new section of our history optional, and this section is ancient India. Clear? See, again, I'll let you know before we start this section, we need to understand the approach. Clear? Because from here we are starting with Indian history. Clear? Indian history includes ancient India, medieval India, and finally modern Indian history. Clear? Just understand from here, unlike world history that was quite straightforward in nature, Indian history will entail huge amount of interpretation, it will entail huge amount of diverse approaches, and therefore you need to understand historiography properly, because without proper historiography you cannot write solid answers or answers which is marked with conceptual background. Clear? So one thing that is very important from history is Indian history is perspectives, interpretation, approach, and opinion of scholars and historians do matter. Clear? Therefore, time and on we'll keep on discussing those different interpretation. And the syllabus prescribed by UPSC is very scientific in nature. It reflects historical sense. The most important thing I'll let you know, ancient India starts basically with sources. Clear? Why? Because history without sources amounts only to story or fiction. But as being a scientific discipline, the most important thing in ancient India is whenever you write something, it must be based on historical source. Don't write anything which does not have backing of the sources. Therefore, UPSC examiner has also kept sources as the first topic, and we need to cover the sources elaborately enough, because we will be using these sources throughout our discussion of ancient India, that is from basically prehistoric period till early medieval age. Clear? And time around will come on to discuss all these sources, that is sources like epigraphy, which stands for inscriptions, then numismatics or coins, then literary sources, then accounts of foreign travelers. We will be discussing this week all these sources. Do these sources thoroughly, because we'll be using these sources throughout the discussion on ancient Indian history. Clear? So this topic is one of the most important topic which needs to be covered elaborately, and here only we'll have a sense of historiography, that what has enabled historians to come to valid conclusions throughout ancient India, which is totally based on sources. Bereft of sources, if you write any answer, it will be a mere fiction, marks will not be awarded. Clear? Therefore, the most important topic in ancient India is the very first topic, that is sources. You need to understand sources elaborately, and take my words, it's not only that these sources are being asked only in optional, but more important thing, these days sources are important even for general studies also, because last year only there was the first question general studies discussed the accounts of Greek scholars or Chinese scholars who came to India in course of ancient India, even though that forms a part of culture, because Huayan, Yuan Sang, all of them who came to India, they commented about India's socio-economic condition. We need to understand that. Therefore, sources are important, and without sources anyway, history is bereft of scientific character, and we all believe this discipline to be of scientific nature. We need to understand sources. So the very first topic is very important. We need to understand it elaborately. Clear? Before we start with ancient India and sources, just understand, I'll let you know. Clear? The perspective that needs to be understood. Clear? How come Indian history began to be studied, or rather began to be researched? It is very important to be understood that even though Indians had certain sense of historiography in ancient India also, but history as a modern discipline began only with arrival of Europeans, or basically the British traders in India. When British began to arrive in India from the beginning of the 16th century, these British traders began to understand Indian culture, Indian history, and in order to understand this thing, they began to read manuscripts and literary sources available in India. And when they began to read this thing, the primary objective was to reconcile their rule or exploitative rule with the native population of India. For them, Indological studies or studies related to India became very important, and initiatives were taken by those British officers only. And when they began to discover sources all across India, they began to write their own version of history, and when they wrote the colonial version of history, it began to be countered in modern India by nationalist leaders of India. With the beginning of Indian national movement, one perspective is also important, that national leaders of India began to question the colonial version of Indian history, and they began to give their counter arguments. This further generated interest in Indian historiography, the most important role played by none other than national leader Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, who gave a very prominent statement in course of Indian national movement that no nation can ignore its own history, and this, if any nation ignores its history, it will ignore only at its peril. Meaning thereby, a country cannot survive without knowing its past tradition, because with past traditions only we can learn what mistakes were committed, and then we can rectify and take a proper measure in coming time. That is the most important aspect or most important relevance of learning this discipline, that is history. How British started this course of historiography in India, we'll just understand. When British started to arrive in India, British scholars and officers began to move all across Indian territory, and that marked the beginning of exploration. So for first thing that they began to do is they began to explore the available historical materials all across Indian territory, and when they also began to realize that there is time to even excavate the surfaces of the earth to unearth some important historical artifacts and materials. With this objective, the first major step taken towards Indian historiography was in form of the establishment of an institution known as the Archaeological Survey of India in 1861 by a very prominent British officer, Alexander Cunningham. When he established Archaeological Survey of India in 1861, institutional support began to be given to historical exploration and excavation. Here it became much more important just because 4 years back only, a mighty revolt took place in northern and central part of India, and British realized if they don't understand about Indian history and culture, they cannot reconcile the people of India to British rule. It became very important for them to promote institutional support to historical exploration excavation, and that resulted into establishment of ASI or Archaeological Survey of India in 1861. But this institution, Archaeological Survey of India, needed huge amount of resources to conduct exploration and excavation, which entails huge amount of expenditure all across Indian territory. Since colonial rulers were not ready to invest huge amount to learn about past traditions of India, Archaeological Survey of India could not conduct major research and exploration, and it became almost a defunct organization in the second half of the 19th century. But by the beginning of 20th century, when national movement started to pick up very fast, a British officer decided to re-establish Archaeological Survey of India with huge financial support, and this officer was Sir John Marshall, who re-established Archaeological Survey of India in 1902. And under the pressure of national leaders of India, this institution began to explore and excavate important locations in India. And while this exploration and excavation was going on, at this time only, British officers discovered a very prominent urban remains of a city on banks of river Ravi in 1921, which was termed as the city of Harappa. And when this city of Harappa was excavated at this point of time, a huge world of culture, Indian culture and civilization began to be witnessed. And at this point of time, Indians began to take pride in the past traditions of India, as they also had a very developed culture and civilization in the past. From here, exploration and excavation began to take place in different forms. And when this science of exploration and excavation began to take place, different scientific methods began to be applied in exploration and excavation. In the field of excavation, first of all, vertical digging began to be done. Vertical digging means that in and around Indus Valley zone, the layers of earth began to be unearthed in a vertical fashion in order to unearth important materials. But vertical digging did not provide comprehensive information about any site, because vertical digging was confined to only one place. It required horizontal excavation as well. But when vertical digging was being done, different strata of culture began to be found beneath the surface, and this strata began to be read thoroughly, and this resulted into a new method of analysis which is known as stratigraphical method of excavation and analysis. And this stratigraphical method was started by another great British officer, Sir Mortimer Wheeler. And Sir Mortimer Wheeler began to unearth the different strata, and based on the remains found in different strata, different cultures began to be fixed at this point of time. Pottery remains began to be found, iron metals began to find, coins began to found, and on this basis, different phases of history began to be fixed. At the same time, since vertical digging could not provide elaborate information, British were forced by national leaders to go even for horizontal excavation as well, and some sites were horizontally excavated which provided comprehensive information. But since horizontal excavation, that is excavating one place altogether, was an expensive exercise, it was not continued by Archaeological Survey of India extensively, and it has not been continued even now, because this horizontal excavation requires huge amount of funding, and Archaeological Survey of India is bereft of major funding to go for horizontal excavation. So dominant method of excavation still remains to be vertical digging, but as we all know, vertical digging does not provide complete information. You need to understand, because you will be asked comparative and relative importance of different historiographical method to understand history. We need to understand excavation techniques applied in India is not very perfect, because it is largely followed by vertical digging, and vertical digging does not provide comprehensive picture. And horizontal digging, since it's very expensive exercise, it's not being funded by state or central government of even present government of India. This thing needs to be understood. At the same time, when this digging began to be done and several important materials began to be found, all these materials were to be given certain phases in history, a new scientific technique was applied. And this scientific technique to fix the dates of especially the human remains and animal remains is known as carbon-14 dating method. What is this carbon-14 dating method? Which has enabled us to fix the date of the remains found beneath the surface, that has given validity to science of exploration and excavation. We'll come to this technique of carbon-14 dating. Clear? How it began to develop, what are the methods to be applied. Understand this topic in terms of relative importance, because compare and contrast is asked among multiple sources. Is it fine? First of all, clear? Write heading as, write ancient India. Write heading as ancient India. Write subheading as sources. Ancient India, write subheading as sources. Clear? Right. History as a discipline. History as a discipline. As a discipline is marked by scientific character, marked by scientific character, as it is based on evidences and sources, based on evidences or sources. Clear? Right. History bereft of sources will amount to, history bereft, B-E-R-E-F-T, bereft of sources will amount to fiction, will amount to fiction, and therefore sources are to be taken. Sources are to be taken seriously, seriously in historical reconstruction. In historical reconstruction. Reconstruction, clear? Right. The research in historiography, the research in historiography began with arrival of the British in India, arrival of British in India, who began to explore and even excavate, who began to explore and excavate to understand the archaeological sources, to understand the archaeological sources. Okay? Right. This phenomena was started to comprehend India's culture and tradition, to comprehend India's culture and traditions, so as to reconcile the people of India, so as to reconcile the people of India to the British rule, to the British rule. Clear? Right. Understanding Indian sentiments, understanding Indian sentiments became much more important, on account of the mighty revolt of 1857, mighty revolt of 1857, which gave rude shock to the British, which gave rude shock to the British. Like consequently, a British officer, Sir Alexander Cunningham, a British officer, Sir Alexander Cunningham, established right in capital, the Archaeological Survey of India, ASI, the Archaeological Survey of India, ASI, in 1861 to conduct systematic exploration and excavation, Clear? Change paragraph. Like the science of archaeology, including different methods of digging, is a costly exercise, costly exercise. Clear? Right. The colonial government, next sentence. The colonial government was not in favor of, was not in favor of huge investment towards archaeological activities, Clear? Right. Therefore, ASI, Archaeological Survey of India, became a defunct organization, by the end of the 19th century. Clear? Now change paragraph. Right. By the beginning of the 20th century, Indian national movement began to gain resonance among masses, and national leaders began to demand support for Indological studies, studies related to India, Indological studies. Clear? Right. In fact, a prominent national leader, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, claimed that any nation can ignore its history, only at its peril. PERIL, only at its destruction, only at its peril. Clear? Right. Under pressure of Indian national leaders, peril, PERIL, right, under pressure of Indian national leaders, a British officer, Sir John Marshall, re-established the Archaeological Survey of India, ASI, re-established ASI in 1902. To conduct archaeological excavations. Change paragraph now. Right, with institutional support, Indian archaeologist, they are Amsani, R.D. Banerjee, Indian archaeologist with institutional support, Indian archaeologist began to excavate the fertile Indus zone, the fertile Indus zone. Clear? Right, in 1921, it's a major breakthrough. In 1921, an urban center was excavated and explored. An urban center was excavated and explored on the banks of river Ravi. On the banks of river Ravi, to be termed as Harappa, to be termed as Harappa. Clear? Right, this exploration and excavation, this exploration and excavation opened a new world for archaeologists, new world for archaeologists, that resulted into the discovery of a large civilization, which flourished during the third millennium BC. BC is before Christ. We'll come to this sense also. Third millennium BC. Clear? Right. The extent of this great civilization. Very important line. The extent of this great civilization. Is still not fixed. As excavations are bringing new sites, to the knowledge of historians, Rakhi Gari, to the knowledge of historians. Right here only, this indicate, next sentence, this indicate that science of exploration, excavation, and excavation needs to be supported and financed, even in contemporary times. Clear? Change paragraph. Clear? Right. The science of excavation began with a distinct method. Of vertical digging. I hope you understand vertical digging. Clear? Suppose this is the surface of the earth where the digging has to be done. Vertical digging means one place is identified and here the digging is done in this way. In this, you will have information about only this region. But horizontal digging means you have identified a large place and you have started to dig the whole place together. This will give more comprehensive picture than vertical digging. But this seems to be, or rather this is a very costly exercise which is not funded by Archaeological Survey of India even now. And this was not promoted by British rule at that time. Therefore, of late we have started to go for horizontal digging to have complete picture. There's another process to be understood. In this horizontal digging, huge amount of materials like brushes are required, because in the process of digging, the archaeological materials get destroyed also. In order to find those materials in this exact shape, we need to go for scientific experts and scientific techniques. This again entails huge amount of expenditure, and therefore horizontal digging is normally not supported. Therefore, our knowledge of excavation exploration remains to be highly limited and restricted. You need to understand this thing when you will compare and contrast with other sources to reconstruct history. Clear? First of all, it started with vertical digging, and even now it remains to be the major technique followed by Department of Archaeology at this time also. Clear? Right? Vertical digging. Right? As per this technique, a historical site is identified. A historical site is identified and limited area is unearthed, to collect archaeological remains. Relative importance has to be there. Clear? Right? It must be understood. That vertical digging provides only limited information. Which is a great limitation in historical reconstruction. Clear? Change paragraph. That the second method followed by archaeologists is horizontal excavation, whereby the explored historical site is excavated en masse, ENMASSE, collectively, is excavated en masse. In situ is excavated en masse. Clear? ENMASSE. En masse means collectively. In situ means taking the whole thing as a lot. En masse. Clear? Right? Even though it provides comprehensive information about a historical site, it is not pursued due to huge expenditure. Clear? Expenditure, right? Therefore, Exploration and excavations. Exploration and excavations provides limited information. Provides limited information that needs to be corroborated. This historical sense that needs to be corroborated with other historical sources. With other historical sources to arrive at valid conclusion. To arrive at valid conclusion. Conclusion. Clear? Change paragraph. Right. The science of exploration and excavation. The science of exploration and excavation is based on a prominent scientific technique, which is known as carbon-14 dating, which is known as carbon-14 dating. Why it is scientific, how it has enabled us to understand sources, we'll understand. Clear? Just understand. In the process of either the vertical digging or the horizontal digging, large number of artifacts, large number of historical remains has been found. Even skulls or skeletons of human beings has been found. Skeletons of animals has been found, and how they were flourished or when they flourished, we need to fix the date, because history largely is based on chronological mentioning of the evolutionary process. In order to fix the dates of those important things, we follow a very important and scientific technique known as carbon-14 dating technique. What is this technique all about? What is C14 dating?
Huh. Every organism has some carbon in it.
Have some carbon, yeah?
And when it dies, then slowly and with a speed, with a constant rate, it started demolishing. So, with the differentiation of the rates, constant and the rate that is changing, we can find out the age of that particular thing.
How can we find out the date with constant and fluctuating process of decomposition? How can we find the dates? What is C14 dating? Half-life. What is that? What is half-life? What is the C14 dating? It's a very scientific technique. It's applied even now. Clear? Whenever you find any skeleton that is in the graves and all, clear? Because we'll see burial system was a very important thing, and we'll read about burial system even in Indus Valley civilization. Clear? Because from the burial system we come to know about their socio-cultural traditions also. It's very important. Clear? Burial system is important, and from burials, how these skeletons serve the source. Because first of all, we fix the date of those skeletons. How this is done? This is done through C14 dating. This technique is that according to scientific analysis, it is claimed that every creature, not only human beings, even animals also, every creature, when he is alive or she is alive, it consumes carbon from atmosphere at a constant rate. Clear? Because this consuming of carbon is a constant process done by all creature on this earth. Clear? So composition, or rather consuming of carbon, is a continuous phenomena at a constant pace by that creature. But once that creature dies, the process of consuming or absorbing carbon from atmosphere stops abruptly. Clear? Now what the process begins after that? As soon as that creature dies, the accumulated carbon, that is the radioactive isotope of carbon, which is known as C14, this collected amount of carbon isotope in that creature, it starts to decompose from that point. Clear? And the pace of decomposition is also constant in nature. Clear? And it has been calculated, since the pace of decomposition of carbon in creature after the death is constant in nature, out of the total accumulated carbon, half of that amount gets decomposed in a definite time period, and that time period is basically 5,568 years. So in 5568 years, the total, out of the total amount of carbon, half of that amount gets decomposed naturally, and therefore this is termed in this technique as half-life. Clear? And therefore whatever carbon remains thereafter, half of that amount will get decomposed in another 5568 years, and remaining amount of carbon which is left, half of that will again get decomposed after 5568 years. Since it is a long span of time, that is 5568 years, it has enabled us to understand even the dates of people who flourished in prehistoric times, which was the Ice Age period. This is because half-life itself entails more than 5,000 years. Therefore, if 5,000 years is calculated, an amount of carbon decomposition is looked into that, we can easily calculate the time period in which the creature flourished. This technique of understanding the date and chronology of any creature who is even dead is known as C14 dating, which is basically an isotope of carbon, radioactive isotope of carbon, that decomposes at a constant pace. This technique is largely applied to fix the date of archaeological remains, especially the creatures. This is C14 dating. The technique is clear. Right, next sentence. Right, according to this technique, all creature consumes carbon from atmosphere. All creature consumes carbon from atmosphere at a constant pace. At a constant pace. Clear? Right. With death of the creature, the process of consuming, the radioactive isotope of carbon, the process of consuming the radioactive isotope of carbon, C14, stops immediately. Clear? Right here. At the same time, the accumulated C14, it starts to decompose. At a constant pace. Here it is also consistent. At a constant pace. Okay. Right. It has been calculated by experts. That half of the accumulated C14, decomposes in 5568 years. Decomposes in 5568 years. Right, this is termed as the half-life. This is termed as the half-life, and it can be used to ascertain, ascertain the date or chronology, the date and chronology of any creature, in multiples of half-life. In multiples of half-life. We can go on multiplying. Multiples of half-life. Clear? This technique is clear, right? The carbon-14 dating technique. The carbon-14 dating technique has enabled historians and archaeologists, has enabled historians and archaeologists to study the evolution of, human beings from prehistoric to the contemporary times, from prehistoric to the contemporary times, Clear? Change paragraph. Right. The science of exploration and excavation. Exploration and excavation. Excavation was the beginning of Indian historiography, which provides primary sources, for historical reconstruction, Right. However, due to serious limitations, scholars began to look for other sources, to have comprehensive understanding, about the past. Right, such attempts led to another scientific discipline, known as epigraphy, E-P-I-G-R-A-P-H-Y, known as epigraphy. Clear? Right. The science of epigraphy means the study of inscriptions, written by rulers, and the court poets, on surface of rocks, pillars, walls of temples, and even on copper and silver plates, copper and silver plates. It's clear. It's related to exploration only. Clear. Now we'll understand the importance. Just understand. Clear. Excavation, exploration, you have understood the relevance and you have also understood the limitation. Limitation because most of the excavation has been done vertically. That provides only limited information. Only few sites have been excavated horizontally to provide comprehensive information. Therefore, this needs to be supplanted or rather provided with other sources as well. And another major source, which is the source, is importantly in form of inscriptions found all across Indian territory, and we'll see inscriptions are the most relevant source because that has remained to be unaltered from historical times till contemporary date, and therefore we'll see inscriptions according to scholars are termed as the lifeblood of history. Without inscriptions, historical reconstruction proves to be a tough exercise. Therefore, in contrast to exploration excavation, the most important technique that was developed was to study the inscriptions written by rulers right from ancient times. We'll just understand how it began. Clear? When British began to explore and even excavate large areas all across Indian territory, they came across certain messages written on large pieces of rocks, especially in the frontier regions of India. They also found some messages written on large number of pillars in India, and they also found large number of messages written on the stone surfaces in front of temples and caves as well. When they began to read these inscriptions in Indian languages, they came to know these are the messages which were written and conveyed by contemporary rulers of ancient India, which can provide deep insight into Indian historiography. And when this began to be read, for a larger period of time, it remained to be unexplored in nature. It could not be identified who wrote this, what was this. But at the same time, clear, when large number of rock inscriptions and pillar inscriptions began to be read, they came to know there was a ruler in ancient India who directly spoke to his people through these inscriptions. And this ruler was named as Devanam Piyadasi. That is, it's a Prakrit term which means a person who is dear to God, that is, who is close to God. And the title that he used in most of inscription was Devanam Piyadasi. But in other literary sources, we could not find any ruler of this name. Historical research began to take place, and finally an officer of British East India Company named as James Prinsep in the year 1837 identified that Devanam Piyadasi is none other than the greatest ruler of ancient India, that is Ashok, who took the title of dear to God or close to God, because in some inscriptions Ashok has written his personal name or Ashok as well. And the messages written in those inscriptions and these inscriptions were considered to be very similar in nature. The tone of writing is considered to be very similar in nature. It has enabled him to justify that Devanam Piyadasi is none other than the great ruler Ashok. And Ashok got almost all his inscriptions written in Prakrit language and Brahmi script, because this language was easily understood by masses, as he wanted his messages to be read and understood by common masses. So he never adopted the classical language, that is Sanskrit, to write inscriptions. He got all his inscriptions written in Prakrit language and Brahmi script, except some inscriptions in the extreme northwestern part of India, which was written in Iranian script known as the Aramaic script and Kharoshthi script, and the language being known as the Aramaic language. But in larger parts of Indian territory, these inscriptions has written in Brahmi script, which has been read and understood clearly to understand how Ashok was able to establish a large empire, which he was able to sustain through a new doctrine that he gave, and this doctrine known as Ashokan Dham. It opened a new chapter altogether in ancient India to understand about the greatness of Ashok, who ruled in 3rd century BC. He became the first person to directly talk to his people with his inscription. This became a very important source to reconstruct Mauryan history of ancient India. But after this, large number of other inscriptions began to be excavated in course of time. Those inscriptions also began to be understood in order to understand comprehensive information about ancient Indian history. This was a major breakthrough in historical research in India. We'll talk about Ashoka inscriptions. Clear? Right, next paragraph. Right, the science of epigraphy assumed, the science of epigraphy assumed huge amount of significance, assumed huge amount of significance in Indian historiography, in Indian historiography, due to large number of rock and pillar inscriptions, found in different parts of India, Right, British scholars tried to read these inscriptions, which was ordered by a ruler, referred to as Devanam Piyadasi, right in bracket, dear to God, referred to as Devanam Piyadasi. Clear? Right, however, this ruler could not be identified with any Indian ruler, that created a great challenge in Indian historiography. Right, this mystery was resolved. By an officer of British East India Company, James Prinsep, who argued that Devanam Piyadasi was a title of a great ruler, Ashok. Right, with this identification, the greatness of Ashok began to be realized. Who reconciled diverse sections, through the principle of Dhamma, Dhamma, principle of Dhamma. Dham, clear? Right. Ashokan inscriptions are written. Inscriptions are written in Brahmi script. Written in Brahmi script and Prakrit language. Prakrit language, which was a common language of the masses. Common language of the masses. Right, next paragraph, it's very important. Historiography, clear? Right, with decipher of Ashokan inscriptions, decipher of Ashokan inscriptions, Indian leaders began to take pride. Indian leaders began to take pride in the past tradition, in the past tradition, and countered the colonial perspective, and countered the colonial perspective that Indians were incapable, that Indians were incapable to rule themselves. Ashok ruled over a large empire, to rule themselves. Clear? Right, this gave enough courage to Indians. This gave enough courage to Indians to challenge the British rule in India, to challenge the British rule in India. We'll come to the inscriptions elaborately. We'll discuss modern history. Change paragraph. Clear? We'll come to that. There are 14 major rock edicts, 14 minor rock edicts, pillar edicts. We'll come to all this classification also. Change paragraph. Clear? Right. In the science of epigraphy, in the science of epigraphy, another major contribution was given by a ruler of Eastern India, given by a ruler of Eastern India, ruler of Eastern India, Kharwale, East India Kharwale, who ruled over the region of, Kaling, modern Odisha, ruled over the region of Kaling, modern Odisha, during 1st century BC. During 1st century BC. This description is very important for historiography. Clear? Right. This, right, he wrote an inscription on the walls of Hathi Gumpha cave, walls of Hathi Gumpha cave, which is located near Bhubaneswar, located near Bhuvaneshwar. Just understand, Hathi, because in front of this cave, two large images of elephant is kept. And quite obviously, Odisha has always been known for large number of elephants. Clear? Gumfa. Gumfa is basically the word which indicate cave. Hathi Gumfa, that is cave which indicate prevalence and protection of elephants. In English we write Hathi Gumfa cave, but this cave is not required. Hathi Gumfa itself, cave denoting the importance of elephants. Clear? Right, in this inscription, it's very important. In this inscription, Kharwale has mentioned his reign, R-E-I-G-N, his reign of 13 years, 13 years, in perfect chronological order. It indicates historical sense. In perfect chronological order, clear? Right, this indicates, very important, this indicates that ancient rulers had a sense of historiography, had a sense of historiography, whereby colonial claim that Indians lacked historical sense, can be negated. Clear? Change paragraph. Right, in the field of epigraphy, a major contribution was given by a foreign ruler, Rudradaman. He was not Indian. By a foreign ruler, Rudradaman, who belonged to the Central Asian tribe. He belonged to the Central Asian tribe of Shakas. Clear? Right, Rudradaman ruled in the region of Kathiawar, South Gujarat, in the region of Kathiawar, where he learned and patronized, very important, where he learned and patronized Sanskrit language, even though being a foreigner, patronized Sanskrit language. Clear? Right, he became the first ruler to write an inscription in Sanskrit. Sanskrit. During 2nd century AD, during 2nd century AD, which is popularly known as, Takht-e-Bahi inscription, popularly known as Takht-e-Bahi inscription. Right here again another distinctive feature. Clear? Right. Another distinctive feature of this inscription, is its poetic character. It's written in the form of poetic style. Is its poetic character, Poetic, poetic character, which is known as the Kavya style. We use the word Sanskrit word for poems, that is Kavya, which is known as the Kavya style. Right here only, the content is also important. Right, in this inscription, Rudradaman has mentioned that he repaired, R-E-P-A-I-R-E-D, repaired a dam. He repaired a dam on Sudarshan Lake, Kathiawar region. He repaired a dam on Sudarshan Lake for irrigation activities. Okay, right. This indicates the progressive rule. Of Rudradaman, who got completely Indianized. Now write the perspective. Indianized. Clear? Change paragraph. Right. This inscription was highlighted by Indian scholars. That Indian culture assimilated large number of foreigners, which indicate tolerant attitude. Right, this became a major argument. To criticize British rule, which was completely exotic in character. They never got Indianized. Completely exotic in character. Clear? So one is peaceful principle of Dhamma given by Ashok. Another is inscription written by Rudradam that indicate secular activities like promotion of agriculture. One inscription that indicate high sense of historiography through chronological mentioning of events. Another indicate huge amount of power and glory attached to one ruler, and that ruler was none other than Samudragupta. Clear? Right, next paragraph. In the field of epigraphy, in the field of epigraphy, a notable contribution was given by a powerful military ruler of ancient India, a powerful military ruler of ancient India, Samudragupta, ancient India Samudragupta, who ruled in the 4th century AD, 335 to 330 AD. We'll come to all these rulers who ruled in the 4th century AD. Here our focus is on sources. 4th century AD. Clear? Right. Under the guidance of Samudragupta, his court poet wrote a biographical account, or prashasti. Biography in Sanskrit was prashasti. Biographical account or prashasti. To glorify him. Right, this rock inscription is located at Allahabad, which is popularly known as Allahabad Prashasti, Understand what very important aspect of Indian culture here. Allahabad Prashasti. Clear? Change paragraph. Right. In this account, Hari Singh has written 33 lines. In pure Sanskrit. Gupta rulers patronized Sanskrit. In pure Sanskrit, to highlight the military achievements of his patron, Patron. Right. If this account is believed and accepted, it seems that Samudragupta never faced any defeat. Throughout his military career. Clear? Right. Therefore, European scholar, therefore European scholar V. Smith, European scholar V. Smith has claimed, highly biased scholar V. Smith has claimed that Samudragupta was, right within inverted comma, Napoleon of India. Napoleon of India. Close inverted comma. Right, however, this claim is refuted. This claim is refuted, R-E-F-U-T-D, refuted by Indian scholars, is refuted by Indian scholars, as it is largely biased, as it is largely biased. We'll understand the reason, clear? Right, it is well known that Napoleon was defeated. It is well known that Napoleon was defeated several times, not only once, was defeated several times, unlike Samudragupta. Unlike Samudragupta. Right, therefore, assertive historians of India, therefore, assertive historians of India claims that Napoleon should be given the title the other way around. Napoleon should be given the title of, right with the middle comma, Samudragupta of Europe. Napoleon should be given the title of Samudragupta of Europe. That will be much more justifiable. Samudragupta of Europe. See, these perspectives are very important. We are right now asserting ourselves very strongly. We need to understand all biased versions needs to be changed. Clear? So, Samudragupta of Europe. Clear? Change paragraph. Right. The Allahabad Prashasti is important for another reason. Is important for another reason, as it indicates the character of two ancient Indian rulers. Right, on the one side of the rock, Hari Singh has written Sanskrit inscription that mentions about violent approach and continuous warfare. Violent approach and continuous warfare of Samudragupta. Right, on the other side of the same rock surface, on the other side of the same rock surface, non-violent principles of Dham On the one side, there's extreme violence. On the other side, there's extreme non-violence. Non-violent principles of Dham, propagated by Ashok, is written in Prakrit language, is written in Prakrit language. Clear? Right. It indicate that ancient India produced powerful military rulers, as well as great peaceful rulers, Clear? Change paragraph. Right. In the science of epigraphy, a major contribution was given by a South Indian ruler, Pulakeshin II, South Indian ruler, Pulakeshin II, who belonged to Chalukyan dynasty. We'll come to all these regions, just look at from the perspective sources. Chalukyan dynasty during the 7th century AD. It was contemporary of Harshvardhan, 7th century AD. Clear? Right. Under his guidance, a court poet, Ravikriti, wrote a biographical account, in an inscription at Ahyo, modern Karnataka, at Ahyol. It's very important for historiography. At Ahyol, Aihole, very important temple center. Right, in this inscription, Ravikriti has clearly mentioned, that Pulakeshin II was a powerful ruler. Pulakeshin II was a powerful ruler who even defeated the ruler of North India, Harshvardhan, on the banks of river Narmada, Right. This information, we'll come to historiography, this information is taken seriously is taken seriously to counter the literary evidences, of Chinese scholar, Yuan Sang. He came to India during the reign of Harshvardhan. Counter the literary evidence of Yuan Sang, Chinese traveler Yuan Sang, who claimed Harshvardhan to be a powerful ruler. It can be negated because he himself was defeated by Pulakeshin II. Right. Moreover, because compare and contrast is asked. Moreover, court poet of Harshvardhan, Banbhat, Banbhat, also mentions Harshvardhan to be a powerful ruler, but indicate, does not mention directly, but indicate that Harshvardhan could not defeat Pulakeshin II. So there's a difference. Could not defeat and get defeated are two different things. He mentions that Harshvardhan could not defeat, but he doesn't write that Harshvardhan was defeated. Clear? The way of patronizing the ruler. Clear? Could not defeat Pulakeshin II. Right? This makes it amply clear. That inscriptions are more reliable source of Indian historiography, as compared to the literary sources, Clear? Right. Beside, inscriptions remains to be unaltered. As it was written on solid surface. Right. At the same time, literary sources can easily be changed. As these were written largely on palm leaves in ancient India, PALM, palm leaves. Right. Therefore, it is accepted in historiography, that inscriptions are the lifeblood of history. Clear? See, compare and contrast, you have to understand which source is the most important, and in order of that, we'll have to draw the precedence. Right now, we'll go according to syllabus, but in the last, we'll say which is the most important source, inscription being the most important one. Then we come to the limitations of other sources. We don't have any limitations with respect to inscriptions because they provide objective account of the rulers of ancient India and their policies that remains to be unaltered till contemporary times. Clear? Apart from inscriptions that deals with science of epigraphy, we'll move on to another important source for historiography in ancient India, and that was related to study of the system of currency and coinage, which is known as the science of numismatics. And those currency and coinage, they also assist us to understand the socio-economic as well as the political conditions of ancient Indian history. So apart from exploration, excavation, archaeological remains, we have epigraphy, and now we'll move on to another source, that is currency coinage, which is termed as the science of numismatics. We'll go into that source. Yeah, please.
So under which category inscriptions are categorized, like archaeological or literary?
See, again, I'll let you know. If we look into inscriptions as source, it is never taken as a literary source. It is always taken as a source of archaeology. Clear? Because branch of archaeology. Why? Because through exploration, excavation also only we came to know about these things. Why? Right now we are talking about those rock surfaces which were lying beneath the ground. But at the same time, some rock surfaces have also been digged from the ground also, whereby certain inscriptions were written. Clear? Not only this, there are certain copper plates which we have talked about, basically that deals with land charters, clear, but that are not taken as important source. Those copper plates were not found above the surface. When digging exploration was going on, those copper plates were unearthed, and therefore they come under archaeology. We don't take as a literary source. Why? Because literary sources are basically concerned with religious sources in India, clear, and most of the time they were written for only spiritual and material upliftment, not for any other text. So if you classify our inscriptions or epigraphy, it will come out as a branch of exploration and excavation, not under literary sources. Literary sources we have a totally different thing, clear? And literary sources are further classified. We classified largely into religious category, then secular category, and then even in other category like regional languages also, clear? But these are not to be taken under, inscriptions are not to be taken under literary sources. If it is to be taken anyway, it has to be taken under science of archaeology and exploration, clear? This is clear, first of all, clear? Now we'll come to another important discipline, that is science of numismatics. Anything to be asked. See, comparative analysis has to be done. Look into the sources very clearly. You get questions on sources every year. You need to understand the relative validity, clear? Limitations of archaeology and exploration, then limitations of inscriptions at the same time. But at the same time, as we know, since inscriptions are the most important relevant source, we need to understand that inscriptions provide much better understanding than any other source like exploration, excavation, or even literary sources as well. One comparison we have done with respect to Harshvardhan. Banvat mentions that Harshvardhan could not defeat Pulakeshin II, but Banvat doesn't write Harshvardhan was defeated by Pulakeshin II. That indicate he was trying to glorify his master. Such glorification cannot be accepted for objective assessment of history. Therefore, we need to rely more on inscription or science of epigraphy. That is what is known as the lifeblood of history. Is that clear? Yeah, please. You want to ask anything?
Can we rely on both words? Like Ravi Kirti said something, Banvat said something. He also like.
See, again, I'll let you know the important thing, clear? First of all, when Ravi Kirti wrote this inscription, clear? It is not that the inscription written by Ravi Kirti has to be accepted anyway. He was also glorifying his master. Harisan also glorified the master, that Samudgupta was never defeated in his military career. But even then, why do we consider those things to be more valid than other sources? Why don't we believe that Banvat was right? Or why don't we believe that Yuan Sang was right? The reason, again, I'll let you know, clear? That all these court poets who were writing inscriptions at that point of time, clear? They were writing inscriptions, we cannot deny, to glorify their master, but at the same time to give a message to large number of adjoining people that these rulers has achieved these objectives, clear? So that large number of people could accept the rule of that ruler. It was basically to give a strong message to adjoining ruler. It was not only to satisfy the urge of only the ruler, it was basically to proclaim his rule over large areas. So if anything wrong could have been written, at that time only, the people could have retaliated, the people could not have allowed him to write, because that was a public message given. Just understand difference, clear? If you are writing any book, you are writing something very personal, clear? And that alteration can be done easily. But when you are writing something in publicly, when you are writing something, it must be acceptable to public at large. When Ravi Kriti wrote this inscription, Ayor, large number of people were witnessing this inscription while it was written also. If something wrong could have been written, the people could have objected, and Ravi Kriti could not have been written, Ayor inscription, clear. Why Samudgupta, when he wrote this inscription, Hari Singh, which is full of violence and huge amount of attack taken by Samudgupta, people could have stopped him, because on the other side of the same rock surface, peaceful principle of Dham of Ashok has been written. Why didn't people object? Because that was the reality. Because people knew Samudgupta is taking expeditions to Deccan, to the extreme northwestern part of India. He has defeated large number of forest tribes. Since it was a natural thing that was happening at the time, people accepted that. So since it was a public declaration, which was done in public places, on rock surfaces, and which was accepted by public at large, it can be said that it really happened at that point of time. But if we compare the accounts of Yuan Sang, for instance, I'll let you know, clear? Yuan Sang came to India in 7th century AD. Yuan Sang has written several wrong things in his account. We'll come to that. First important thing, when Yuan Sang came to India, he declared that Harshvardhan is a great ruler of North India who maintains perfect law and order in his empire. But it is to be understood, Yuan Sang himself has written, when he entered India, he was robbed of his belongings. Since he himself was robbed of his belongings, Chinese traveler and scholar is robbed of his belongings. How can we say that Harshvardhan maintained perfect law and order at that point of time? This is itself contradictory in nature, clear. All these things, it's a very important declaration that was done. Yuan Sang wrote this account not in India. When he went back to China, he wrote this account which is known as the history of the Tang dynasty. Why? Rulers of Tang dynasty in China sponsored him to come to India. So he was trying to glorify the Tang dynasty. He was not concerned about India. In that account of Tang dynasty has mentioned that Harshvardhan was a great ruler at that point of time. It indicates that he was least bothered about. And while he was writing the accounts, he was in China. Therefore, no one could witness, no one could clarify, or no one could cross-examine the account. Since cross-examination could not be done, we cannot believe in this account. Rather, we'll have to take into account which was publicly written. That is the importance of inscription. Why do we say Ashoka was the first ruler to speak to his people directly? Because he got his message written on public spaces, on rock surfaces. Again, Banbhar, he was a court poet. He was basically trying to glorify his master. Until and unless the court poet will glorify the master, do you think that master will allow him to write biography? Biography cannot be written. Why all the rulers did not write his biography on rock surfaces except Samudgupta? Because Samudgupta achieved something commendable, clear? But all these rulers did not achieve. So they could not write anything publicly. But privately, court poets began to write their account, and in Harshcharit written by Banbhar, he has glorified the master. In order to hide the weaknesses of his master, he has written, Harshvardhan defeated large number of rulers of North India, but could not defeat Pulakeshin II. That is giving a shadow to his weaknesses. But the reality is, he could not defeat he was not able to defeat Pulakeshin II. Himself got defeated by Pulakeshin II. That is clearly written by Ravi Kriti in Aihole inscription. So you need to understand the relative merit, clear? Why inscriptions are the lifeblood of history? Because it's a public message given by the ruler and the court poet. If anything wrong would have been there, masses could have retaliated, and that public message could not have been there. This is one thing to be understood. But if you're writing something in private, you can write anything. And that can also be altered also. Most important, leave aside these things. The most important text of ancient India is said that later interpolations were added, and that most important text is Arthashastra, clear? Arthashastra was written initially by Kautilya Chanak, but later some chapters were added by another person who is named as Vishnugupta. The pattern of writing also gets changed, and the name of authors also gets changed. So literary sources can never be taken to be the true source as compared to inscriptions. Need to understand the relative merit, clear? So it was public declaration done by any ruler. Public declaration, until accepted by public, cannot be done. And since all these inscriptions were public declarations, it means it was largely accepted at the time. If it was not wrong, it was not true, public could not have accepted that. Basically, court poets who write literary accounts of their patrons, they are basically sycophants. They're basically sycophants because all those biographical accounts are written in front of the ruler. If any line that is not acceptable to the ruler is deleted at that time only. That's a very important thing to understand. That is why these accounts cannot be taken as a true source. When Abul Fazl was writing Akbarnama, he was writing Akbarnama in front of Akbar. When he used to say that he's going to write this sentence, he used to look on the face of Akbar. If Akbar had anything mental reservation, his eyebrows began to shift and in direction, Abul Fazl used to change the statement because he knew that is not pleasing to his master. Clear? So basically, any person who writes biography, especially literary accounts, they are sycophants. That cannot be taken. That is why we'll see the accounts of Abul Fazl, the accounts of other, even Amir Khusro, these accounts are taken with huge amount of pinch of salt. They are not taken totally as objective account. Therefore, in this contrast, inscriptions are very important. And understand the difference here only I'll let you know. All these sources like inscriptions, excavations, numismatics will study only in ancient India, will not study in medieval India. Because in medieval India, no exploration, no excavation were done at that point and no material remains. Because largely whole medieval Indian history is based on literary accounts. The greatest legacy of Islamic scholars over India is they started the sense of historical writing. Clear? That started with arrival of Turkish writers in India. Since large number of historical or literary accounts are available to us, even that mentions year by year the developments. We don't refer to other sources. But in ancient India, we have to refer to diverse sources because there are multiple sources and each needs to be cross-examined to arrive at valid conclusion. Therefore, ancient India has to be based on sources. Medieval India also, but we have plethora of literary sources, starting with arrival of Turks, that is Mahmud Ghazni only. We have Kitab al-Hind, clear? We have another source that is Shahnama, which was written by Firdausi. Then again, coming back to Muhammad Ghori and his clash with Prithviraj Chauhan, we have a biographical account of Prithviraj Chauhan, that is Prithviraj Jaso, written by Chand Bardai. We have got plethora of sources from there, clear? And since real history writing starts from there, we don't have to refer to multiple sources. Multiple sources only for ancient India. Is that clear? Okay, coming to another important dimension, that dimension is the study of currency and coin, that is known as the science of numismatics. Clear? Right, introduction first of all, clear? Right, in Indian historiography, in Indian historiography, in no, you just write in continuity. Just underline the word that is numismatics and epigraphy. In Indian historiography, study of coins and currency system. Study of coins and currency system has been done elaborately to comprehend socio-economic, first of all, to comprehend socio-economic as well as political conditions of ancient India, even political as well, political conditions of ancient India. Right, the discipline related to the study of coins, the discipline related to the study of coins is known as numismatics, Clear? Change paragraph. Right, the first evidence of rudimentary coins, comes from Indus Valley civilization, in form of seals, S-E-A-L-S, in form of seals. Right. In fact, seals are the most important. In fact, seals are the most important artifacts, of this civilization, of this civilization. Clear, right? However, these seals were largely used. These seals were largely used as medium of transaction, as medium of transaction in internal trade, transaction in internal trade. Clear? Right, the external trade during Indus Valley civilization, the external trade during Indus Valley civilization was largely based on the barter system, largely based on the barter system, even though some coins has been found in Mesopotamia also, but it was largely based on system of barter, exchange of goods, based on barter system. Change paragraph. The real beginning of currency and coinage, beginning of currency and coinage took place during the 6th century BC. During the 6th century BC, when second urbanization took place. When second urbanization, the first is Indus Valley, when second urbanization took place in the Gangetic Plains, in the Gangetic Plains, in the Gangetic Plains. Clear? Right, these coins were largely made of copper, and were termed as the punch marked coins, and were termed as the punch marked coins because certain symbols were punched, because certain symbols were punched on these coins as a royal sign, punched on these coins, clear? Right, these punch marked coins, indicate flourishing trade and commerce, among major cities of the Gangetic Plain, patronized by 16 large kingdoms, patronized by 16 large kingdoms known as Mahajanpads. 16 large kingdoms known as Mahajanpads. Clear? Change paragraph. Right. The system of circulating copper coins, copper coins continued during Mauryan rule, and these coins came to be termed as Karsapanas, copper, came to be termed as Karsapanas, or simply as panas, Karsapanas or panas, Karsapanas or panas. Clear? Right. The circulation of panas and their acceptability, is clearly mentioned, in the Arthashastra of Kautilya, Right. In this work on statecraft, make it clear, even though it's Arthashastra, it mentions very least about economy. Clear? It's a work on statecraft, polity and governance. Clear? It has nothing to do with economy, even though it mentions about economic regulations, cannot be denied. But don't get confused with the term Arthashastra. The Arthashastra basically means economics, but it doesn't mention about economics. A book on statecraft, polity and governance. Clear? In this work, just repeat the sentence. On statecraft, Kautilya mentions the salary of bureaucrats, Adhyaksh, salary of bureaucrats ranging from 48 panas, to 60,000 panas. Now coming to historiography, clear? That this range clearly indicate that there were large number of bureaucrats with clear-cut hierarchy. Salaries varied with clear-cut hierarchy, which in turn highlight that Mauryan rulers maintained a large and centralized bureaucracy, centralized bureaucracy. Clear? Change paragraph. That during the rule of Ashok, Mauryan ruler, certain royal symbols like crescent, half moon, royal symbols like crescent, 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 comma, peacock, and hills were punched, hills, HILLS, were punched, whereby coins assumed artistic role, assumed artistic role, artistic role. Clear? Right. During the phase of Ashok, these coins are found in the frontier regions, that has enabled scholars, even political history is important, that has enabled scholars to define the political boundary of Mauryan Empire, political boundary of Mauryan Empire, along with Ashokan edicts, rock inscriptions, along with Ashokan edicts. Clear? Change paragraph. Clear? Right. The circulation of coins received further support in the post-Mauryan period. Marked by arrival of Central Asian tribes, Clear? Right, the first such tribe known as Indo-Greeks, brought gold from Central Asia, and began to issue gold coins for the first time. Indo-Greeks, gold coins for the first time. Clear? That these coins are of great historical importance. These coins are of great historical importance as it contain images of kings and queens, that has enabled historians to understand the history of Indo-Greeks, Change paragraph. That the most important contribution to numismatics, was given by the Central Asian tribe, of Kushans, in which Kanishk played a major role. Kanishk played a major role. It's a very important ruler of ancient India. Right here only, Kanishk was the only ruler of ancient India. Kanishk was the only ruler of ancient India, who kept large parts of Central Asia, intimately connected with North India. No other ruler of ancient India intimately connected with North India. Clear? Right. At this time, during the rule of Kanishk, 1st century AD, at this time, Chinese and Romans had a flourishing. Chinese and Romans had a flourishing silk trade. Mainland Silk Route had a flourishing silk trade passing through Central Asia. Right. Kanishk began to collect transit fee. Kanishk began to collect transit fee in form of gold. Transit fee in form of gold from Chinese and Romans. That led to huge inflow of gold in India. Very important contribution. Huge inflow of gold in India. Clear? Right. Kanishk began to issue large number of gold coins. Large number of gold coins with highest metallic purity, no debasement, with highest metallic purity, which indicate prosperity, Right. In fact, historians claim that economic vibrancy was at its peak. Economic vibrancy was at its peak. During the rule of Kanishk. Change paragraph. Clear. Right. With respect to numismatics, major contribution was given. By Gupta rulers from the 4th century AD. Clear? Right. They issued largest number of gold coins. But these coins contain impurities. Purity was maximum under Kanishk. Contain impurities. Clear? Right, such debased gold coins, Debased, such debased gold coins were termed by Guptas, as dinars, termed by Guptas as dinars. Clear? Change paragraph. Clear? Right. The debasement of currency under Guptas, the debasement of currency under Guptas indicate lack of trading activities, which was high under Kanishk, lack of trading activities, which was primarily due to the beginning of feudalism in India. Beginning of feudalism in India. It's a very important trend. Okay? Right. Gupta rulers began to provide land grants. Gupta rulers began to provide land grants to Brahmins and military soldiers. Land grants to Brahmins and military soldiers. That led to focus on agriculture, rather than trade. Clear? Right. The feudal phenomena continued. Till the early medieval phase. Okay? Right. The greatest authority on Indian feudalism, R.S. Sharma, Ramsaran Sharma, feudal R.S. Sharma, has highlighted clear-cut relation between feudalism and lack of coins. Clear? Right. In fact, scholars claim that early medieval phase till 10th century can be characterized as a phase of monetary anemia in Indian history. Phase of D.D. Kosambi, R. Sharma will come to this. Phase of monetary anemia in Indian history. It was drained off. Clear? In India till 10th century. From 10th century, trade began to be revived. Anemia. Clear? Right. Next paragraph. Right. The study of coins. became important became important with arrival of Turkish warriors to India. Arrival of Turkish warriors to India. Warriors to India. Warriors to India. India, which led to circulation of silver and copper coins. Silver and copper coins. Clear? Right. In historiography, it's a very important development. In historiography, it is acceptable that Muhammad Ghori, Ghori, Muhammad Ghori defeated the Rajput ruler, Prithvi Raj Chauhan, Rajput ruler Prithvi Raj Chauhan, in the Battle of Tarain near Delhi. In the Battle of Tarain in 1192, its second battle, Battle of Tarain in 1192 AD. Clear? Right. Consequently, Muhammad Ghori allowed Prithvi Raj Chauhan to rule over the region of Ajmer. Chauhans were ruling from Ajmer. Allowed Prithvi Raj Chauhan to rule from Ajmer. And this information is provided through coins. And this information is provided through coins. Clear? Right, the coins found in Ajmer region. The coins found in Ajmer region contain the name of Prithvi Raj Chauhan. Contain the name of Prithvi Raj Chauhan. On the one side, Chauhan on the one side, and the name of Muhammad Ghori on the other side. Muhammad Ghori on the other side. Okay? That such political information derived from coins, such political information derived from coins is important, because a contemporary literary text, Prithvi Raj Raso, literary text Prithvi Raj Raso mentions, Prithvi Raj Raso mentions that Prithvi Raj Chauhan was taken to Central Asia. Contradictory information. Prithvi Raj Chauhan was taken to Central Asia, where his body was chopped into, CHOPPED, into 24 pieces, just to glorify the courage of Prithvi Raj Chauhan. 24 pieces. Clear? Right. This again indicate that literary sources, especially the biographical accounts, literary sources especially, the biographical accounts must be taken with a pinch of salt. Must be taken with a pinch of salt. As these were written to glorify the patrons, as these were written to glorify the patrons. Clear? Right. In this way, coins can be used to reconstruct the political history, to reconstruct the political history, along with socio-economic history of India. Socio-economic history of India. History of India. Relative merit needs to be understood. See, just understand one thing, I'll let you know. Just understand the periodization. Clear? Ancient India does not mean only till 7th century AD or till the reign of Harshvardhan. In comprehensive sense, ancient India means from prehistoric times till 12th century AD. Even though from 750 to 1200 AD, it is known as early medieval phase, but largely it is counted in ancient India. That is why we can discuss the events till 12th century AD, including the arrival of Muhammad Ghori to India. Clear? If you read all the standard texts on ancient India written by Upinder Singh, Romila Thapar, Ramcharan Sharma, they mentions ancient India till 12th century AD, till the establishment of Delhi Sultanate by Qutubuddin Aibak in 1206. Clear? Therefore, till 12th century we count it as ancient India, even though from 750 to 1200 AD we count it as early medieval phase. And this is to be taken into consideration, whereby coins here indicate not only socio-economic but political history, which corroborated with other sources can give us objective view about ancient Indian history. This was about numismatics, starting with the seals in ancient India or Indus Valley till copper and silver coins with arrival of Turks in India, which was further systematized by first major ruler of Delhi Sultanate, Iltutmish, who began to circulate copper and silver coins to be termed as Jital and Tanka. Clear? This was numismatics in ancient Indian history. Clear? Apart from numismatics, we'll move on to another important sources to reconstruct ancient history. See, Satamanas and Nish, clear? These are terms used for coins only, but again I'll let you know. These started to be used basically in Nishk and Satamanas when merchant guilds began to be formed. Clear? And merchant guilds largely began to form from the period of Kushans only, but maximum number of guilds operated during Gupta period. Guilds began to issue coins. Clear? These coins were termed as Nishk and Satamanas. Clear? There were different terms used for coins which were used for circulation in definite regions. Clear? Why? Because in Gupta period, again I'll let you know, unlike Mauryas maintained centralized control over large empire. Guptas could not maintain centralized control because they began to give lands to the feudal lords. That resulted into fragmentation of territory. And in those fragmented territories, when traders began to organize their trade, they began to promote their trade according to their own system of currency and coinage. And those merchant guilds began to circulate the coins, which they termed as Nishk and Satamanas. They were terms just because of merchant guilds, because Gupta rulers did not maintain centralized control. But Chanakya advised Mauryan rulers to maintain centralized control. So there was only one currency in Gupta Mauryan period, and that currency was Panas. Even officers were paid salaries in Panas. Clear? But in Gupta period, salaries were not paid in coins. Rather, salaries began to be paid in form of land grants. And it started more importantly during Harshvardhan. That is why from here, feudal sentiment starts, because land ownership was passed on to the major intermediaries between the ruler and the common masses. That is why we'll see Gupta rulers adopted the title of Maharaja Dhiraj, that is one Raja over other Rajas. So no, there was no such titles adopted by Mauryans. Chanakya mentions only one name for ruler, and that ruler was Swami, Supreme Commander. Clear? There is no such term used in Gupta rulers. They use the term Prambhattaraka. They use the term Maharaja Dhiraj, that is one Raja over other Rajas. Clear? That indicate delegation of authority. No such delegation of authority took place under Mauryas. Since delegation of authority took place, trade became pocketed at this point of time, merchant guilds began to emerge. And merchant guilds began to issue their coins also. Clear? And these coins began to be termed by them as Nishkansatamana. Leave aside coins. Merchant guilds even began to maintain the military forces under Guptas. And those military forces came to be known as Sartavaha. Clear? All this indicate complete decentralization of power under Guptas. Clear? We'll come to all these things. Here we are looking from the perspective of sources and we are comparing it with other sources. This was another important source, that is numismatics or coins. Now we'll move on to another important dimension of sources, that is related to surviving monuments from ancient India. The most important monuments being religious monuments like stupas and then followed by temples, largely in the southern part of India. We'll look into the importance of those monuments to understand historical developments in ancient India. How far those monuments can also be used to understand and to corroborate other informations available for ancient Indian history. This much is clear till numismatics. That is, first is archaeology, that is exploration excavation, then followed by epigraphy, that is inscription, and then by numismatics. From among all these sources, the most important being inscriptions or signs of epigraphy. This much is clear. Now from here we'll move on to another important thing, that is monuments, and then we'll move on to literary sources. We'll do with literary sources elaborately because you get questions on literary sources, especially Shruti literature, that is the Vedic literature. It's clear, okay? From here, we'll continue tomorrow. We'll start with monuments and then we'll move on to literary sources. Clear? Understand literary sources conceptually, why they are known as Shuktas, why known as Shruti literature, what is the status of this literature now in these days, and who is the authority. The greatest authority on Vedic literature is not an Indian scholar. The greatest authority to study Vedic literature is a German scholar, Max Muller. Clear? He is considered to be the greatest Indologist. Clear? A person who took deep interest in Indological studies, F. Max Muller. We'll come to Vedic literature also. It's fine, clear? We'll continue from here tomorrow. Clear? Thank you.